shillings, which is equivalent to 60% of GDP. In 2010, the public debt was at 39% of the GDP, which was approximately 1.2 billion Kenya shillings. Currently, the country facing a 3.2 trillion shillings and a 3.1 trillion domestic debt.
So if people are not consuming because of COVID-19, because they do not have money in their pocket, and people are not producing, organizations are not producing because of COVID-19, because of social distancing and lockdown, then it means that when we come up with a budget of 1.6 trillion, which is even higher than what was collected in 2018-2019, I think 1.58 trillion, when we did not have some of those challenges, then I think for me it is more ambitious, which brings a problem actually when it comes to how the budget is going to be implemented.
This will be the first time the external debt is increased by higher margin than domestic debt. Treasury CS Ukuru Yatani, in defending the government's borrowing appetite, however, says the move is aimed at moving away from expensive commercial loans.
We must actualize real and actual fiscal consolidation to ensure that we continue to reduce on our budget deficit, so that we borrow less.
The issue of public debt is now an emergency in this country. I think we need to be bold and candid and tell the executive that we need a day to have a national dialogue on public debt.
Yatani's maiden budget coming at a time the global economy is shaky. According to International Monetary Fund (IMF) projections, Kenya's economic growth is likely to remain flat this year. The House Committee on Budget, however, claims the 2020-2021 will be unrealistic.
I think the solution to the debt in this country is to renegotiate some of those debts. We cannot be paying 1 trillion interest on debts every year and expect to do anything using in a financial year.
Governments across Africa are currently faced by huge loan burdens, especially from China. These African governments have, however, called for the suspension of debt interest payments as the COVID-19 crisis deepens. Joash Onsare, TV47, Nairobi.
Now, tomorrow, Thursday, the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury, Ukuru Yatani, will read in Parliament the budget highlights for the 2020-2021 financial year and the revenue-raising measures. This will happen amidst the coronavirus pandemic that has had adverse effect on global economies. And in Kenya, the tax bracket has reduced significantly. Mwangi Maina reports.
Kenyans will be eagerly waiting for Mr. Austerity, the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury, Ambassador Ukuru Yatani, for his maiden budget presentation to the country in the National Assembly. With a depressed economy reeling from the economic turmoil brought about by the novel coronavirus, Kenyans will be waiting for this man to make known what he has for them. Falling on the backdrop of the pandemic, this time round, things will be different. It will be a budget day like no other. Not too much color and pomp as the CS and his team make their way to the National Assembly chambers and will present the budget in the presence of only 25% of MPs who will be in the chamber. The budget comes at a time when the country is facing massive job losses, missed revenue targets, reduced revenue allocation, and increased expenditure towards the fight against coronavirus. This means that Yatani and his team have to scratch their heads even harder to balance the tough equation.
Tutaendelea kuona ni kwa njia gani tutasaidiana na Wakenya wenzetu, haswa wale ambao wamelemewa kabisa, na tuone ni kwa njia gani tutaweza kuwasaidia katika wakati huu mgumu ambao tuko nao.
With the government having reduced value-added tax from 16 to 14% and reduction in payee and a tax relief for persons earning 24,000 shillings and less, this means the government has to look for means to sustain the economy. This will lead to more borrowing, to put more money in the pockets of Kenyans, with every sector looking up to Yatani. The Central Bank of Kenya says SMEs are most vulnerable, with 3/4 most likely not to make it past June since they lack capital. Last year, the economy grew downwards from 6.3% in 2018 to 5.4% in 2019, with a ravaged economy, floods, locust invasion, COVID-19 pandemic, and wanton misuse of public funds. The economy can only go down.
SMEs, MSMEs as well, don't have a lot of, let's say, buffers in terms of credit or in terms of other resources that they can use. And therefore, they generally would die quickly. So they are very vulnerable in that sense. And as a matter of fact, there was a survey that was done at the end of April, and that survey indicated that three quarters of SMEs, of the surveyed SMEs, do not have cash beyond 2 months.
Walking on a tightrope, CS Ukur Yatani and his East African counterparts are seeking a moratorium on paying foreign debts to allow the East African nations to at least survive on the little they have. Uganda, Tanzania and Rwanda will have their budgets read tomorrow. Yatani is the second Treasury CS under the Jubilee administration. His predecessor, Henry Rotich, left office early this year after being charged with corruption in court. Mwangi Maina, TV47, Nairobi.
Well, Kenyans have expressed mixed expectations for the 2020-2021 budget at a time when the country is combating the coronavirus pandemic and hard economic times. Here are some of those whom we spoke to and their expectations.
Mimi naonelea hii budget wakisoma kesho hakuna kitu inasaidia mkaichi wa Kenya sababu corona iko imeleta shida, ni kama gari imekwama kwa matope. Unaona? Huwezi kumaitoka ndani. So mimi ningeonelea hii budget hata ungeacha kwanza isome.
Kwa hivyo tungependelea ashukishe unga kabisa, ishuke, imepanda sana. Hasa hamna hata maziwa. Iko juu zaidi. Maziwa saa hii mimi kwa nyumba yangu huwa nanunua ya 45 na sasa huwa nataka kwa wiki nitumia kama paketi 10. Sasa unaona hiyo ni pesa mingi sana maziwa peke yake.
Budget ikuwe rahisi kwa raia kama sisi, yani ikuwe chini. Isikuwe wasiongeze vitu, maisha imekuwa ngumu.
My expectations is that watakuwa wamepunguza vitu, especially housing and nini. You see like what has been happening. People have been, manyumba zimebomolewa. People don't have money right now. People don't have money.
Hamna Kenya itasaidia kwa sababu hata saizi mafuta ilishukishwa mpaka 84 shillings. Lakini hata mafuta yenyewe ukiweka kwa pikipiki kama sisi wana bodaboda, hakuna kazi tunafanya nayo. Unaweka tu mafuta kwa pikipiki na kaa unazunguka tu nayo.
Ni budget ya watu wakubwa. Si budget ya mwananchi wa kawaida. Tungeomba wangeangalia vile tumeadhirika kwa ajili ya hii ugonjwa wa corona na walete msaada wa mahitaji. Wakenya wako na mahitaji kwa sababu wameadhirika, hata biashara hakuna.
Of course, that forms the basis of our discussion a little bit later. Remember, you can be part of that discussion. Text us on 22047. Comment on our Facebook page at TV47. Use the hashtag TV47 News Tonight. Be part of that discussion that we'll be having later in these newscasts. But first, the country is set to be reopened gradually in the coming months. This is according to an agreement reached on during the extraordinary summit between the national and the county governments convened today at State House. The day-long meeting between President Uhuru Kenyatta and the 47 county governors also agreed upon gradual relaxation of the COVID-19 restrictions in the country. Zainab Mohammed with the details.
Just months after the country's partial lockdown and the placement of strict containment measures to combat the rising cases of COVID-19 in the country, there's a sign of an end in sight. An extraordinary summit between the national and county governments held at State House on Wednesday agreed on the gradual reopening of the country. According to a statement sent to newsrooms, the meeting between President Uhuru Kenyatta and the governors discussed ways to slowly relax the containment measures due to their effects to the country's economy.
Given ourselves 30 days additional, and we have done this in order to ensure that our citizens remain safe. But I do believe that within that 30 days, each and every one of us must do that which is necessary to ensure that even as we open up, we open up in a manner that is safe, that protects our citizens, especially the elderly and those who have other ailments and ills that would be ready victims for this enemy of ours if we were to open up without a proper plan.
It's clear that revenue is going to fall drastically, and we have no idea how it's going to perform in the years to come.
The governors also discussed the effects COVID-19 has had on different sectors, including education, the economy, and the struggling health sector, as the president pointed out that it's an opportune moment for the country to improve conditions in all these sectors.
Quite a number of sectors are gravely affected. If you look at the agricultural sector, it's been hit by low demand because export has shrunk. Mainly our foreign exchange earners like horticulture, tea, coffee, has even been made worse, even some situation in the agricultural sector with their own set of locusts. The manufacturing sector, there's low demand, there's a reduction of import of raw materials and other intermediate goods. The financial sector, there is reduced diaspora remittance. There's capital flight as a result of foreigners withdrawing their capital. There's reduced investment inflows. The revenue performance has actually gone down, and all other domestic taxes has also shrunk.
The head of state has also called upon the governors to set aside their party differences and work together in putting Kenya back to its feet.
It's the conscience of the entire nation is called to order. The party affiliations and political dynamics of the moment are put asunder. When this summit sits, its only business is Kenya. No party affiliations. We are encouraging social distancing, but here we are encouraging no political distancing and no ethnic divisions.
The governors also deliberated on modalities of implementing the 300-bed capacity COVID-19 wards in every county.
The handwork is essentially at the county level. We have seen various degrees of success and admittedly failures as well in some areas.
The next extraordinary summit has been set for Wednesday next week, when more deliberations and decisions on COVID-19 containment will be made. For TV47, I'm Zainab Mohammed.
Elsewhere, the government has officially launched the home-based care and isolation guidelines, making Kenya the first African country to adopt the system. Speaking at Afya House Wednesday evening, Health CAS Dr. Rashid Aman said that 78% of infections in the country are asymptomatic and can be monitored at home. This as the government seeks to decongest isolation facilities in the country. David Muboka reports.
The country has taken a different trajectory in the handling of positive COVID-19 cases following the launch of home-based care and isolation guidelines that take effect from Wednesday. With 78% of infections in the country mild, hospital-based isolation facilities will be preserved for those severely hit by the novel coronavirus. Speaking at Afya House, Nairobi on Wednesday, Health CAS Dr. Rashid Aman said the supervision of the implementation of the 22-page guidelines shall be done under the supervision of medical and public health officials.
While the World Health Organization recommends that all laboratory confirmed cases of COVID-19 be isolated and cared for in a healthcare facility, it also recognizes that not all cases can be cared for in a health facility when the numbers begin to rise.
However, for a patient to qualify for home-based health care, he or she is expected to have been confirmed first as COVID-19 positive at a laboratory. He or she should display only mild symptoms, have no pre-existing medical conditions, and have access to a suitable space at home. Whether the residential setting is suitable for offering such care to a patient will depend on availability of appropriate caregivers, separate bedroom, toilet, and bathroom facilities, availability of recommended personal protective equipment to both the caregivers and those infected, and capability to adhere to recommended precautions. The patient should be placed in a well-ventilated room and should have minimal interactions with other people, including caregivers. If the patient develops severe symptoms, they should call 719 and the caregivers further notify the designated healthcare worker. For symptomatic patients, the isolation should last at least 14 days and can be declared COVID-19 free if they do not display symptoms since they first tested positive. For the symptomatic cases, home-based isolation care can only end after 72 hours of no fever without using any fever-reducing medicine. The guideline has also introduced a digital monitoring system of patients dubbed the Jitenge system to monitor household contacts, the isolated patient, and the post-isolation discharged patient. According to a man, community health volunteers will be the communication link between healthcare workers and the households for a period until one is declared COVID-19 free.
Home-based care in informal settlements, where households share small spaces, will require identification of institutions within the community, institutions that meet the recommendations for providing such care.
The patients will, however, have to fill a form outlining their eligibility for the program, with healthcare workers set to assess whether they meet the criteria. This as the country today recorded 105 new cases and 1 fatality. Now, with home-based care guidelines officially launched today, the country also recorded its first triple-figure tally of recoveries in a single day. David Muthoka for TV47 News Tonight, Nairobi.
It's 1/4 past the hour. You're watching us live on TV47 News Tonight with me, Abubakar Abdullahi. Time for us to take a short break. We still have a lot lined up for you. We'll be back with more news after this break. Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. To more news now. Kirinyaga Governor Anne Waiguru has filed a case to challenge her impeachment by the County Assembly. Waiguru's move coming a day in which the Senate Speaker Ken Lusaka received a resolution to impeach the county boss. Meanwhile, Gender and Public Service Cabinet Secretary Professor Margaret Kobia criticized Waiguru's impeachment, a move that has sparked sharp reaction from a section of Kenyans.
Kirinyaga Governor Anne Waiguru is challenging the legality of her ouster by the County Assembly. Waiguru claiming there was a court order barring the County Assembly from debating her impeachment. The resolution to impeach her has now been received by Senate Speaker Ken Lusaka. Lusaka says the impeachment process in Senate will be fair to both the Kirinyaga County Assembly and the county boss.
We'll then decide which way to go about the whole process, because one, a decision will have to be made, because a motion will then have to be brought to the Senate indicating whether we are going to have a committee of 11 to look at the allegations made, then make recommendations, or we are going to have a plenary session just like we did with the Kiambu.
Earlier on, Gender Cabinet Secretary Professor Margaret Kobia had defended Waiguru, criticizing her ouster. Kobia terming the ouster as one that didn't value strong women leadership. The statement read that the governor is being impeached during the fight against COVID-19, which is negatively impacting on socio-economic development of the country. However, the statement has been criticized sharply. Waiguru is facing violation of the Constitution, abuse of office, and gross misconduct, with her fate now lying in the Senate. Andreen Kilemi reporting for TV47.
Elsewhere, it is a reprieve for embattled Ford Kenya party leader Moses Wetangula after the registrar of political parties Anne Derutu asked the two rival factions of the party to resolve the matter through internal party dispute tribunal. This comes after Moses Wetangula asked the party tribunal to bar the offices of the registrar of political parties from initiating changes made to the party leadership until the case is heard and determined.
Addressing media Wednesday after receiving the letter from the registrar of political parties, Moses Wetangula termed his purported dismissal from the party leadership as unconstitutional, and now the matter will be resolved internally.
And the documented submission of the legitimate leadership of the party, she has reached a conclusion that there is a probable dispute in the party, and she has read our party constitution very clearly and understood it. And our constitution says if there is any issue in the party, either between a member and the party, or between a member of the party and another member of the party, the matter must be resolved through a dispute resolution mechanism set out elaborately in that constitution.
Further, Kiminini MP Chris Wamalwa says the party has already initiated a disciplinary committee that will seek to punish members purported to have organized his ouster, saying action will be taken against them.
We are going to endeavor discipline in this party. And as we move forward, the three masqueraders must appear before the disciplinary committee from next week. That is Honorable Eseli, Honorable Munyinyi, and Cynthia Mutere. Failure to which, choices have consequences. Simba Party, we are not going to entertain any disciplinary cases.
A few days after his dismissal as Ford Kenya party leader, Moses Wetangula took the matter to court, seeking to stop the registrar of political parties from initiating the changes, terming them as unconstitutional. Through his lawyer John Haminwa, Wetangula wants the matter to be heard and determination made before any changes are gazetted.
To the registrar of political parties through units from Malas. I've got 3 copies here.
These developments in Ford Kenya come after members allied to Moses Wetangula held a day-long meeting with the registrar of political parties on Monday over the stalemate in Kenya's second oldest political party. Eli Logova, TV47, Nairobi.
Elsewhere, a 6-year-old boy lost his life while several other people were rescued from an apartment house in 6-bedroom apartment which collapsed on Tuesday evening in Kericho. Investigations to ascertain the cause of the collapse are underway.
This is the rubble left following the deadly collapse of a 4-story building in Kericho on Tuesday. In its wake, a 6-year-old boy lost his life. His body was buried in the rubble.
Mtetemko, kitu kama mtetemko, nyumba imetetemka na sauti kubwa. Sasa kutoka nje tukasikia sasa imeanza kuporomoka. Sasa ikawa na kiguu na njia, sisi kila mtu ajiokoe.
The tenants said the apartment had started showing signs of collapsing and they had complained, but their pleas to the owner to evacuate them fell on deaf ears.
Kwa vile tuliona nyumba imeanza kuonyesha danger, kuonyesha hatari.
Juzi engineer alikuja akasema hii nyumba haina shida. Kama inge crack katikati ndio watu tunge panic. But now unajua sasa familia wako ndani, watu wote wengi sana wako hapa ndani.
3 of the 4 floors were reduced to rubble. Only the 4th floor remained intact. The building known as Stebbs View Apartment was a residential complex which was said to house nearly 100 people. Kericho Municipality Manager Joseph Rotich said although the owner of the building had all building approvals done before construction, they had begun investigations to check what led to the building to collapse.
They had everything, and we are going to look at the report now. And but as the landlord yesterday said, this house was built in 2012. So and all the necessary documents are there.
Kericho County Police Commander Silas Gichunge said all the tenants who were evacuated are in stable conditions.
4 people were injured and then they were taken to hospital, but they are safe. As I'm talking to you, they are safe.
Calvin Chitwa, TV47.
Thank you, Calvin Chitwa, for that report. 27 minutes past the hour. Time for us to take another short break. When we come back from the break, our discussion tonight is based on what will happen tomorrow. Of course, Treasury CS Ukuru Yatani will be presenting the budget in the National Assembly. But what is in for you, the Kenyan, and for me? Time for us to take a short break. We'll be back with that discussion after this break. welcome back. Thank you for choosing to stay with us. You are watching us on TV47 News Tonight with me, Abubakar Abdullahi. And as earlier promised, let's get to our discussion tonight. We are making sense of the budget. The estimates, of course, will be presented tomorrow in the National Assembly by Treasury CS Ukuru Yatan. Remember, you can be part of this discussion. Tweet us at TV47KE. The hashtag to use is TV47 News Tonight. Send us a message on 22047, or you can call in on the number on your screen. Let me bring in my first guest, Steve Biko, financial researcher. Steve, thank you for making time for us tonight.
My pleasure.
2.7 trillion estimated budget. Is there anything to smile about tonight?
Well, last year, the 2019-2020 budget was 3 trillion. This year, actually, we've reduced it. And in all fairness, I believe Uhuru's government is really trying to do the best for the country. Mm-hmm. But there is nothing to smile about this budget because we are living in unprecedented times. Basically, I would call it biblical times, which means we need to have creative thinking. We need to have out of this world kind of thinking so that we can be able to solve the problems that are actually afflicting our way of life.
Well, Steve, you say there's nothing to smile about, but if you look at sectors within who are the big gainers from this budget, look at the education sector, 504 billion shillings, infrastructure, 189.5 billion shillings. These are sectors that are smiling tonight, aren't they?
Well, it depends on the perspective of how you're looking at it. When you're looking at the $500 billion budget that the Ministry of Education is going to go, half of that is going to be taken by TSC, the Teacher Service Commission, which basically means one thing, payment of salaries. So at the end of the day, there's nothing to smile about it. This is what is expected. In times of like the current times we're living in, we expect a creative thinking that would look at creating resources to actually be able to unleash solutions that will actually make it better for everyone. And for me to smile will mean looking at solutions. For example, now I expected the budget for education to be higher if we're going to look at how are we going to scale up infrastructure so that we can be able to reopen schools. Are we going to improve infrastructure for children outside areas of Nairobi, Nakuru, Mombasa, who are not be able to access internet, so they can be able to access internet?
And despite the increase in budgetary allocation, you still believe there could be something better that would have been done?
I think, let's look at this, this budget estimate and last year's. There's nothing creative about it. It's all the same. Honestly, there's nothing to smile about. And furthermore, where is that money going to come from? So for me, I believe this budget is only focusing on three issues. One is to be able to ensure that recurrent expenditure is actually sustainable, and then our debt obligations are actually sustained, and then the issue of pending bills, because the president has actually been very categorical about pending bills. It's according to them, it's a stimulus aspect, which leaves many of us wondering how that is a stimulus package. But the issue of pending bills, where a lot of our suppliers, a lot of people who are doing businesses with the county governments and the national government need to be paid. So for me, I think this budget is actually focusing on that.
All right, Steve, 2.7 trillion shillings, 1.8 of that is going to recurrent expenditure, 904 billion shillings set aside to pay debt obligations. Then what is in for this budget for Kenyans in terms of development?
Well, why do we really need development right now? We are all facing a crisis.
But that doesn't stop the developmental projects of a country.
It doesn't, but you see, when you're going through a crisis, focus should be on what is actually very important, saving lives, ensuring that the healthcare system does not actually get compromised, does not get suffocated with what's happening. And right now, we know we've reached the threshold of how many people can be admitted in hospital because of the COVID-19 pandemic. We are seeing the Minister of Health actually talking about home care solutions. At the end of the day, I expected better in terms of thinking. Focus should have been on pumping more money into the health sector so that we ensure that the healthcare system is not crippled. Two, we ensure that the SME sector, which actually contributes 80% of all the jobs created in this country, have access to credit. So for me, I expected a budget that actually focused on ensuring that the health sector is actually sustained very well. Two, the issue of creating a budget for Treasury, so that Treasury can create a guarantee of sorts, so that the commercial sector can be able to advance loans to the SME sector with guarantee being backed by government. And then three, the issue of pending bills. So the issue of infrastructure development, honestly, currently how things are, I mean, we're looking at a sick nation, and if we do not fix the health sector, then we're going to have a big problem.
All right, Steve, you talk of SMEs, of which we will come to a little bit later in this discussion, but nonetheless, judging at Kenya's appetite for dollar-dominated debt, in financial terms, what does this mean?
Basically, many of the people who actually give us loans prefer to give us loans in foreign currencies. This is one of the reasons why, is so that they're able to hedge in terms of interest on it, and in terms of ensuring that they get back value for their money. When you hedge based on foreign currencies, it's better than when you do in a local currency, because at the end of the day, one, you want to get back your money, the principal amount that you've given out, and two, you want to get back the agreed interest that is actually there. So when you look at the loans we've gotten, Eurobond and others, most of them are actually done in foreign currencies, and this is a big problem, because now when you're looking at our account, our forex account, deficit account, things are actually challenging. And when you look at the global markets, the forex trade, the dollar is actually fluctuating a lot, the euro is fluctuating a lot, the pound is fluctuating a lot, because we're looking at the domiciled countries for these currencies. They're actually going through a lot of challenges for themselves, especially in terms of leadership crisis, from the UK to the US and the sort. So,
all right, Steve, there's often the debate of a revenue collection versus expenditure. How can a country like Kenya balance the two?
I think KRA does a good job in terms of collection. I think
even though Treasury CS says KRA fell short of its target for the last 7 years.
KRA has done the best in, you only collect what is available, and KRA has done the best to collect that. Unfortunately, before the pandemic, the economy was doing very badly. We're already in ICU in terms of medical quotation, if I'm to say that. And KRA has tried its best. In fact, it shouldn't be a 7-year low, it should be a 13-year low, because things are really bad. The core macroeconomic aspects of the economy, agriculture, manufacturing, tourism, agro-processing, production, construction, actually at their lowest ever. We've seen, if you look at the PMI for manufacturing, it's dropped from an average of 51 to 27 now. So there is nothing that KRA can collect. And in fact, that's why they're looking at expanding the tax base to digital marketplace, so that they can be able to see they can collect more money. When you
but economically, what significance does projecting numbers that you won't meet have?
Normally, projecting numbers is based on past collections, so they know where they know traditional aspects of where they get the money from, and then they project numbers based on that, and then they also look at how are they going to expand the tax base for more. And of course, we also look at the growth of an economy. And the projected growth of the economy was 5.7 before the COVID came in. And now central bank says that we're looking at growth aspect of 2.3%. But I'm thinking we're staring at a recession, and the economy actually is in the negative, because the key aspects of the economy are not actually moving. So for me, I think despite the Treasury having expectations, KRA will have nothing to collect at the end of the day. Even if the president and his team have come up with a stimulus package whereby they've reduced the VAT to 14%, the income tax pay from 30 to 25. There's nothing to tax. People are sitting at home.
Talking of taxes, Steve, in March, President Uhuru Kenyatta cut value-added tax rate from 16% to 14%, and corporation tax was reduced to 25% from 30%. There are those who say, why not zero rate everything at a time when the economic hit of COVID-19 is hitting the country? Is that logically, economically possible?
Yes, it is, and that is what I was saying. I expected creative thinking when these budget estimates were being done. Of course, they were done in April. And in April, we were all aware about the COVID-19 pandemic. We've all been sitting at home for 3 months. What I expected is a budget that actually focuses on 3 issues. The healthcare of the country, the credit access to the informal sector, and pending bills, because the government owes a lot of people for the work done for them. But unfortunately, the budget has been done like as if we're living in normal times, as if everything is fine. And the interesting thing is, I believe the government has very intelligent people. So when I listen to the CS talking about this is a budget that's actually focusing on the pandemic, and unfortunately the numbers indicate otherwise, I'm left to wonder what's really happening. It becomes very difficult to support the government when they're economical with the truth.
All right, let's look at the structure of Kenya's debt. If you divide it into three, the multilateral, the bilateral, and the commercial aspects, if you compare 2009, 2010 to 2020, 2021, you look at the multilateral structure of Kenya's debt stood at 33%. Bilateral remained relatively within 30%. But there is an increase in the commercial structure of Kenya's debt from 4% to 34%. This means the government is borrowing more from within. Is that correct?
Yes.
And why then?
Basically, what we've done is our international partners have looked at the economic situation of the country. Rating agencies like Moody has actually downgraded the credit aspect of our country to unstable. They've looked at it and they've actually realized that for us to be able to get a foreign loan, it's actually going to be very premium and very expensive. If you look at the conversations the G20 countries have been having in terms of a debt relief for third world countries, Kenya is not one of them, because one of the clauses in the Eurobond actually prohibits us from getting debt relief. And this means that our people, the Ministry of Treasury, when they were signing for this loan, were not really keen, or they did not project the way forward on how we'll be able to get debt relief. So the only options that these countries, that our government is left with, is to borrow from within. And this is actually puts a great strain and risk on diverse aspects. One, most of the banks that are actually loaning to the government are listed on the stock market. Should the government default, there'll be a problem at the stock market, because now these banks will be in the red. They will actually not be able to meet the requirements set by central bank. And two, the government is actually siphoning all the money out of the local market, making it very difficult for the informal, for the SME sector and the private sector to be able to have access to funds, because at the end of the day, the commercial sector will opt to lend to the government where they're guaranteed of returns, than give to a private sector that actually been closed for 4 months.
All right, Steve, on the question of debt as well, we already have hit the 6.2 trillion shillings debt. Parliament has raised the debt ceiling to 9 trillion shillings. Is there any significance to have raised those numbers?
I think the current debt amount, if I'm not wrong, it should be around 7 trillion. And I know Parliament...
6.3 as of...
I mean, I'm saying that because the CS for Treasury is not really forthcoming with the information. He will only tell you, oh, these are the number of debts we have in terms of foreign commercial loans, and these are what we have in terms of local commercial loans. So he's not really specific. He's not really been able to break it down. Even when Parliament did ask him to break down the numbers, he was not forthcoming with the truth. And for me, what I know is there's a big problem there. And going forward, unless something is done, we're going to have a big problem.
And talking of the debt, then what is the possibility, what is the way out in as far as the country's debt is concerned, Steve?
Parliament raised the debt ceiling to 9
trillion
so that they can be able to afford the government the opportunity to raise more capital for infrastructure development and growth. The president had a 4-agenda plan, the big 4 agenda, and a legacy to leave. So he needed all the resources. Unfortunately, accountability is a big challenge for this government. Two, a lot of amorphous expenses, and runaway corruption. These 3 issues have been a problem in terms of being able to account for the money that's been borrowed for proper use. I believe borrowing is not bad. And I believe if we borrow money that is used prudently, then I think the country can go very far.
All right, Steve, there is often a public bad perception about debts. You say borrowing is not bad. How good is borrowing?
Borrowing is only good as far as accountability is concerned. You borrow for the... You see, when we took the Eurobond to come pay people who are actually cleaning and making trenches. You're taking a premium loan to come pay casual workers. Doesn't make sense. It is irresponsible, and there's no accountability. I've been trying to look for the projects that Eurobond actually financed. I can't find any, and I know many will argue that borrowing is wrong, and they have their own right, because it will become irresponsible when an administration is not accountable to its people and to the people who are actually giving the money when they borrow money and the money is squandered.
All right, Steve, let me bring in now Raphael Matu, an economist who joins us in the broadcast as well. Good evening. The very theme of this year's budget is, quote, harnessing the big 4 for job creation and economic prosperity. As theme, vis-a-vis the pandemic and the global recession, the effects of COVID-19. It seems as though economic prosperity may be too ambitious of a word to have used. Is it so?
I don't think really it is an ambitious word. I think yes, it's good to realize that after COVID, there will be a lot of challenge, and maybe probably we need to rebuild the economy.
Steve, earlier on, if there is anything to smile about for Kenyans in this 2.7 trillion shillings budget, in your own view, is there anything to smile about, Prophet?
So I think let me not really talk about smiling, because everybody is really going through a lot of challenge. I believe what is really happening is that we will be able to get more details tomorrow as regarding what maybe probably the allocations are really meant for. But the issue is that, of course, yes, we will see the government tries to put money in certain important sectors, but probably, of course, there will be, as we go on with the discussion, there are some areas, of course, we could have required to see more allocations than maybe what we have within the budget.
All right, Raphael, still with you. When the Central Bank of Kenya's governor, Dr. Patrick Njoroge, paints a picture of SMEs that will be cashless in the next 2 months if they are not cautioned, is that an economic scare?
Yes, it's a big challenge in this country, and I personally am a victim because I am also a businessman. And it is true, some businesses will not really survive maybe beyond the next 1 month, the next 2 months. And even when you look at maybe what was given as a package within the stimulus package which was given by the president, I think maybe that one may not be enough. We may still have wanted to have more. But again, we also need to understand that the government is seriously straining. Unless what has happened in the developed world, we may not really be able to support all our SMEs, which maybe probably is a sad state.
Steve, now to the discussion. Steve, if then that is the bleak picture that the Central Bank of Kenya is painting in as far as SMEs are concerned, in an economy that we have seen figures out in as far as job losses is concerned, does this indicate the number of people then who are on the verge of losing their jobs?
Yes. I believe what central bank has done is to speak the truth. It's not a scare, it's the actual truth. As my colleague has actually said, most of us are business people and we're actually victims of having closed our offices and businesses. Unfortunately, the government hasn't really done anything to support SMEs. You see, when you bail out a listed firm on the stock exchange, it's not the same as bailing out an SME that does work in Gikomba. There's a big difference. So I believe the government of Uhuru needs to sit down and come up with a solution whereby they can be able to have a sort of a guarantee fund, whereby SMEs can be able to access loans through their banks, and then the government will give guarantees to them should they fail to honor that. Because at the end of the current lockdown measures, majority, let me just say, 60% of the SMEs will have closed business. I mean, there is no money. Core aspects of the economy, agriculture, manufacturing, production, agro-processing, they're not functioning. And this
then is it the responsibility of the government to have created a credit buffer for these SMEs, Steve?
It is the responsibility of the government to have done so. Because at the end of the day, it's the responsibility of the government to create a conducive economic environment for prosperity. And currently, there's no prudent or conducive environment for economic prosperity. So it is the responsibility of the government to ensure that this is actually done. And I like what Central Bank is doing. Central Bank is coming out with data that is backed with proper research and numbers. And unfortunately, Treasury is not listening. Unfortunately, the present handlers are not listening. And people are suffering at the end of the day. You see, I congratulate the president for bailing out the hospitality industry. The 2 billion will go to selected hotels, which is very good. They seem to have actually organized themselves into a good thing. What about the rest of us who are in amorphous organizations? People who work in Gikomba, people who work in Marigiti, people who work in Chwele Market, for example.
And you question the trickle-down effect of the billions of shillings that have been set aside for the stimulus package?
I mean, what stimulus package are you talking about?
53.7 billion 8-point economic stimulus package that President Uhuru Kenyatta put forth.
If I did work for State House, for example, and I'm owed 1 million, when they give me that money is not money that is going to stimulate my business. That is money for work I've already done with the employees who are waiting to be paid. A stimulus package is something that actually catalyzes new growth, that actually sees you through a difficult period. One of the leading economists in this country, David Ndii, actually did a letter to the president enumerating what the president should have actually done. When you look at a country like Switzerland, what it's actually done in terms of how they're how they're supporting the SME industry. If you look at South Africa...
All right, even though, Steve, in basics economics, stimulus refers to the attempt to use monetary or fiscal policy to stimulate the economy.
That's what I've actually said. Let me give you a good
Which is
example.
an injection of 53.7 billion shillings that the president has done.
That actually, of that, 40 billion of that is actually pending bills.
All right, let me bring Raphael to the discussion. Raphael, then, if there are those who hold the view, rather, that instead of 53.7 billion shillings injection as a stimulus package, inject more liquidity, more money, some even going to the extremes of 5 to 7% of the country's GDP. Is that realistic?
I don't think that is realistic because it's good, first of all, to understand that, yes, the government is equally really struggling, and we also had the economy struggling even probably before we had COVID-19. And maybe probably our expectations could have been higher. When we try to compare ourselves with the developed world, we have seen, yes, they have done quite far much than we can be able to do. And I think that the best thing is that moving forward, we should be able to see that the government tries to do, or rather try to embark on quite a number of policies at the same time, so that maybe probably these policies can be able to enhance maybe one another, because we don't know how long this problem is going to be there. And I don't think maybe probably what has been put on the table so far is maybe probably going to be the final policy. We have to look at a way where we have to continue monitoring the economy and maybe probably trying to look for the best way on what can be done.
All right, Steve, let me get back to you. Seed capital to kickstart this credit scheme, of course, is of the 3 billion shillings that was set aside. Putting this against the number of SMEs across the country, is this first money enough?
The money can be enough, but the implementation aspect is actually flawed, because at the end of the day, I was going to tell you about what South Africa has actually done. South Africa has actually told the informal sector that if you want if you want access to credit, register for a tax PIN. Once you register for a tax PIN, go to your bank. Let the bank look at your previous records, see how you've been performing, then they'll give you a loan. Then we'll be able to monitor through the tax PIN. And basically means what South Africa is actually doing is increasing the tax base for them to be able to collect more money. And that's what KRA will actually done in partnership with Parliament and Treasury, whereby look at the informal sector. Most of the SMEs actually have bank accounts. The best way to be able to access this money is through your bank. So you want a loan, ensure you're registered. You ensure you're going to pay either VAT or withholding tax or gross turnover tax or any form of tax that will actually be applicable, so that we can be able to access the 3 billion.
You talk of interest rates. There are those who hold the view that reduce the interest rates, people will borrow more.
I don't think right now anyone has been focusing on interest rate, because honestly, as a business,
the argument is reduced so that people borrow more.
When interest rate was actually low, no one borrowed, because access to credit was actually a big challenge. And as I mentioned earlier, most of the money in the commercial aspect has actually been borrowed by the government. So the banks have little money to give to the private sector. So unless the government comes up with a guarantee scheme that, yes, loan out the money to the private sector, we will be able to give guarantee. Well, if you look at the non-performing loans, we've got the worst non-performing aspect in the last 13 years because people are not paying their loans. So there is a lot of data that can actually be researched, broken down, and looked at, and we can be able to come up with a better way of ensuring that the private sector can actually access the 3 billion. It's a good move.
All right, Steve, I understand you're out of time, but nonetheless, let me ask Raphael this one last question. We are talking of budgets to the tune of billions. Let's get to the common Mwananchi now. How does someone who has a small business tonight survive the COVID-19 hit?
I can't get you clearly.
Raphael, I'm asking, we initially talked of budgets to the tune of billions of shillings, if not even more than that, to the trillions of shillings. I'm asking, how does someone who has a small business somewhere, anywhere in this country, survive the COVID-19 economic hit?
So I think probably the only way that maybe the SMEs are going to survive is maybe by the government slowly trying to open up the economy, of course amid challenges, and maybe through taking the relevant precautions. Of course, even within the stimulus package, we have something set aside for the SMEs, but I believe that is not sufficient. Like I said earlier, maybe probably there is still a lot that needs to be done. We have issues on taxes which have been put forward, and I think we can only move gradually because this thing seems to have affected everyone, and we just hope that some of the policies the government will be putting up in place will continue to trickle down. We need also to keep on talking to maybe the landlords who are maybe where these people are running businesses, to give them some kind of into maybe for
all right, it seems like we have lost Raphael, but nonetheless, let me ask Steve the very last question. Steve, I was reading the writings of leftist economists earlier on before I came on air. Some holding the view that such a time when the world is in a recession, a great recession, if not worse than that, print more money in as far as you can keep inflation at bay. Does that work?
No, I don't believe in printing more money because money needs to have a value and a purpose. The capital circulation in the economy moves with purpose, and printing more money basically will bring in the question of inflation and knowing how our economy.
But the argument is provided you can control inflation,
and that is very difficult to control inflation at the end of the day, especially in an economy like Kenya, where nothing is actually virtually working. Tourism is dead, agriculture is dead. I mean, we're looking at three critical issues affecting agriculture: lack of credit access for farmers, flooding, and locust invasion. So at the end of the day, this creates more problems. So putting down inflation is going to actually, or trying to manage inflation is actually going to be a great challenge.
All right, I understand Raphael is with us. Nonetheless, let me ask him the final of questions this time. Raphael, the same question as well. There are leftist economists tonight who argue and are of the view that in such a time, print more money, so provided you can keep inflation at bay. Does that work?
Maybe the issue of printing more money maybe probably should only come as the last resort, because of course, as you have said, if we don't put in proper measures to curb inflation, we may be printing money, maybe probably to offset deficits, but the economic implications may be quite negative. Yeah, so I think we have to try and exploit all the available options before maybe probably we can really look into that as an option.
For making time for Raphael Matu, an economist, thank you for making time for us. Steve Biko, a financial researcher, thank you as well for making time for us.
My pleasure.
All right, let's move on from that discussion and get to the world of sports now. Basketball sensation Felmas Korogana is on track of being the first ever Kenyan to play in the Division 1 of the American College Basketball. This is after landing a 2-year deal with Troy University basketball team in Alabama. Take a look.
Our season just ended abruptly prior to the national tournament.